The judge's gavel struck hard against the brown wooden desk, a sharp sound echoing throughout the courtroom, as if it were pounding directly against the heart of Maria Saunders. Each strike felt like a shockwave, pushing her into a battle she had never prepared herself for. What she once believed had already ended was now beginning again, but this time it was not an ending. It was the beginning of a dark truth, the unraveling of everything that had been hidden for so many years. Maria, a 60-year-old woman, sat there with her eyes fixed on the yellow envelope in her hand. Her fingers trembled, not because of age or fear, but because of the surge of emotions rising inside her. For 13 years, she had kept it hidden, like an untouchable treasure, and now it would become the evidence that would decide the fate of her life and the children she had cared for as if they were her own. She lifted her gaze, and her eyes met her daughter Helen, who was sitting across from her. Helen was no longer the innocent girl she once knew. She was now a grown woman, confident and even somewhat arrogant. Maria could never have imagined that the daughter she had once loved and raised could stand in front of her and declare such cruel words. "My mother kidnapped my children," Helen's voice rang out, cutting through the heavy air. "I never agreed for her to raise them." Every word from Helen felt like a sharp blade piercing deep into Maria's heart. Helen was not someone who easily revealed her emotions, yet at that moment her eyes were filled with anger, resentment, and a pain she could not hide. Even so, Maria felt no fear. The only fear she felt was the deep pain of betrayal from her own daughter, the very child she had raised through the years of her childhood. When the judge asked Maria about the accusations, she did not rush to defend herself. What she wanted at that moment was to explain the truth, to explain the love she had given to her grandchildren. Maria offered a gentle smile, yet there was something painful hidden within it. She slowly lifted the yellow envelope into the air, and suddenly Helen's eyes flickered with a trace of fear. "What I am about to present, Your Honor, is not just words. It is the truth," Maria said, her voice steady and filled with determination. Not long ago, she would never have imagined that she would face a situation like this. But now she could see more clearly than ever that everything she had given and everything she had endured truly meant something. She was not only a mother or a grandmother, she was someone who had done everything to protect the children she loved. And now, she would have to fight to keep them by her side. The judge, a middle-aged man with graying hair and sorrowful eyes, looked at her through his glasses and then turned his gaze toward the daughter sitting across from her. "Can you explain these accusations, Mrs. Maria?" the judge asked, his voice softer but still serious. Maria did not answer immediately. She quietly looked at her 3 grandchildren sitting behind her, their eyes innocent yet filled with worry. Noah, the 18-year-old boy, sat attentively with his eyes fixed straight on his mother. Sarah, 16, lowered her head while her shoulders trembled slightly. Olivia, 13, occasionally looked up, her eyes shimmering with tears and confusion. Maria realized that even though they had grown older, they were still far too young to fully understand what was happening. These children had lived with her for so many years, and now she would have to protect them from wounds that might never heal. "Your Honor," Maria began, her voice calm even though a storm raged inside her heart. 13 years ago, my daughter brought the 3 children to me and left them in my care. She said she only needed a few weeks and that she would come back. But she never did. She never returned. These children have lived with me ever since, and I raised them and cared for them as if they were my own. Helen looked at her mother with tears forming in her eyes. But Maria paid no attention. She knew that those tears were not born from love. They came from the failures in her daughter's own life. Maria did not blame her, but she would not accept lies either. "For all those years, I did not receive a single phone call or a single dollar from her," Maria continued, her voice steady and unwavering. "She never visited, she never contacted us. And now, when a large sum of money from my brother's inheritance has appeared, she suddenly returns with her lawyer to demand custody of the children." The entire courtroom fell into silence. Everyone understood what was truly happening. This was a battle not about love, but about money. The truth was slowly coming to light, and Maria could no longer remain silent. She would fight for the grandchildren she had sacrificed her entire life for. She would not allow them to suffer any more pain. Maria smiled softly again, but this time the smile no longer carried pain. It held a strength she had hidden for so long. She would not lose them again. In the stillness of the courtroom, Maria felt her heart pounding harder than ever before. Everything was happening so quickly, yet she knew this was not the moment to slow down or step back. She lifted her head, her eyes shining with determination, and turned to look at her 3 grandchildren sitting behind her. The children remained silent, their gazes distant, yet within those eyes lived a mixture of expectation, pain, and a deep sadness they had never fully revealed. Maria took a deep breath, as if trying to push away the storm raging inside her chest, and then she began to tell her story, the story of a grandmother, a mother who had sacrificed everything to preserve peace for innocent children. 7 years ago, when Helen brought the 3 children to my house, she told me she would only be gone for a short time, just a few weeks. She asked me to keep them for a while and promised she would return once she had dealt with her problems. I believed her. I thought it was only temporary, but that was the last time I saw her. Maria's voice was steady, yet every word felt like a blade piercing straight through her heart. She looked toward the judge's bench, where Helen was still sitting with tears in her eyes, but Maria could see no remorse within them. Helen's eyes carried anger and blame. All Maria could sense was denial, avoidance of responsibility, and the abandonment of a mother who had stayed away for far too long. "Mom, please don't do this," Helen whispered, yet the plea sounded faint and powerless, not enough to move Maria. Maria continued without looking back at her daughter. "After she left, the children stayed with me. Month after month passed, and I received no message, no explanation. They asked about their mother, and all I could say was that she would come back, that she loved them." The memory passed through Maria's mind like a painful echo, but she knew she had to continue. When Maria looked at the children, she saw innocence in their eyes. None of them understood why their mother had left, or why Maria had been left to carry the weight of an entire family alone. Back then, Noah was only 7 years old, Sarah was 5, and Olivia was just 3. Those children could not understand what abandonment meant. They only knew how to cry and ask when their mother would come home. Maria gently brushed her hand through Sarah's hair, the child who had slowly grown up carrying deep wounds she could never fully understand, especially why her own mother had turned away. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the sleepless nights, hearing her grandchildren call their mother's name in their dreams, the quiet sobs that never seemed to fade. "I tried to do everything so they would never feel a lack of love," Maria said, her voice filled with emotion. "I took them to school, attended parent meetings, and worked as hard as I could to provide for them. I sold the most valuable things I owned, and I took extra cleaning jobs on weekends so that the 3 children would never go without." The judge, who had been listening carefully with a serious expression, suddenly glanced toward Helen, as if trying to understand the reason behind Maria's actions. But Helen remained silent, saying nothing, her hands moving slightly as if trying to hide her unease. Maria continued speaking. "When Olivia developed pneumonia at the age of 5, I had to take her to the hospital. They asked for permission from her parents, but I had no documents and no legal authority. I had to complete the procedures myself and hire a lawyer to request temporary guardianship. That was the moment I realized I could not allow them to live in uncertainty anymore. I began doing everything possible to protect them." A brief silence filled the room, and Maria looked toward the 3 children again. Their expressions were no longer the pure innocence they once had, but something more mature, an understanding of everything she had done for them. Noah, now 18 years old, lowered his head and stared at the table in front of him. Sarah and Olivia said nothing, yet their eyes carried a quiet heaviness. "I was granted temporary guardianship. 10 years ago, the court agreed with me and gave me legal custody of them. And during those 10 years, I did everything I could to make up for the emotional emptiness they had suffered." Maria paused for a moment, determination visible on her face. "And now she has returned and says that I kidnapped them." It felt as if a heavy stone was pressing down on Maria's chest. She could not stop thinking about those painful months and years, the sleepless nights, the tears she had shed for children she loved as her own. But now she was ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. These children are not property to be fought over. They are my children. They are my grandchildren, Maria said firmly, her gaze unwavering. And I will not allow anyone, no matter who they are, to take them away from me again. She looked straight at Helen with a powerful and challenging stare. You cannot reclaim what you chose to abandon. You cannot take back the years you left them to live without you. I became their mother. I raised them. And that is what I will protect. Every word Maria spoke sounded like a declaration, firm and powerful, a clear statement that she had endured every trial and would never step back. In the tense atmosphere of the courtroom, Maria felt her body as if it were being pressed into a small corner where she had to face memories that could never be erased. Images and emotions from the past returned all at once, rushing through her like a powerful wave. The feeling had no clear name. It could only be felt deep within her soul. Everything she had done over the past 13 years had now become evidence, had become a weapon to protect her 3 grandchildren. Maria sat upright, trying to keep her voice calm, even though peace was impossible inside her heart. The children had grown up in her arms. They had endured hardships alongside her. They had witnessed silent sacrifices she had never once complained about. They were her pride and the only reason she could continue living, no matter how cruel life could be. These children are not a burden. They are my life. They are the reason I continue to exist, Maria said. Her eyes filled with tears, yet without any sign of weakness. I never had any other choice but to care for them. They have been with me not only as children I love, but as a part of my life that I cannot live without. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to escape, but to remember the difficult years that had passed. A part of her heart still carried pain when recalling those hard times. The days when she had to work 2 or 3 jobs just to earn enough money to support the 3 children's education. The nights when she stayed awake, worrying about their health when fever struck, when the children cried because they missed their mother. Maria turned to look at her 3 grandchildren, sitting quietly, saying nothing, yet their eyes were full of understanding. Noah was now 18, a grown young man, steady and strong, but still unable to hide the old sadness lingering in his eyes. Sarah and Olivia, the 2 young girls, were no longer innocent children. They had become too familiar with Maria's sacrifices, yet that did not mean they could not feel the weight she had carried. These children grew up in hardship, but they were never deprived of love, Maria continued, her voice gradually becoming stronger, as if she were battling the memories themselves. I did not have much money. Money was always scarce. But I had love, and I used every bit of that love to raise them. She remembered the days of endless work, from early morning until late at night, just to earn enough to buy milk, food, and school books for them. There were days when I had to sell my own wedding ring just to have money for their education. The only precious things I had left at that time were the love I had for them. Every night, when I saw the 3 children sleeping peacefully, I told myself that everything was worth it. They deserved a better life. Those memories were not easy to forget. Maria could still remember the stormy nights when the children were sick and she had no money to take them to the hospital. Yet she kept trying to give them the best she could. And it was during those moments that she felt the children's love for her, when they wrapped their arms around her and whispered words of affection. But there were also times when Maria felt a loneliness so deep it seemed unbearable. Long nights with no one beside her, only the sound of sighs and the quiet crying of the children. Yet she could not give up. Her love for them was strong enough to carry her through everything. I remember the nights when Arthur had a high fever, and I did not know what to do. All I could do was sit beside him, wipe the sweat from his forehead, and wait for the fever to pass, Maria said, her voice tightening as her hands gripped the yellow envelope firmly. And Sarah, when she fell into depression because she missed her mother, all I could do was take her to see a doctor, take her out so she could feel some peace. I did not have enough money for all those things, but I had enough love to care for her. Maria looked up, her eyes shining brightly. And Olivia, when she began learning the guitar to find some joy, I learned every note with her. I sang the songs she loved with her. We had nothing, but we had each other. She paused, allowing her thoughts to flow. She remembered the first moment Olivia held the guitar and began playing simple melodies. I never thought about preserving my own dreams. Everything I did was to create dreams for them. All I ever wanted was a life of stability for these 3 children. Those simple words carried the weight of an entire lifetime. A life of constant sacrifice, of endless giving. Maria knew she could never regain the years that had passed, yet she felt no regret. Watching the 3 children grow and mature under her love was all she had ever needed. She lifted her head and looked straight at Helen. Now she was no longer the weak woman Helen had once believed her to be. She was the protector of these children. She was not only their grandmother, she was the mother they truly needed. You cannot take away what I have built for 13 years. Everything I did was for them, and I will not allow anyone to destroy this family again, Maria said, her voice sounding like an oath, firm and unwavering. In the suffocating atmosphere of the courtroom, Maria suddenly felt everything around her becoming blurred. Her daughter Helen was now a grown woman, and she had returned after 13 years of absence. Although Maria could not deny her presence, she knew this return was not because of motherly love, but because of something else. For 13 years, while Maria raised the 3 children, Helen had been completely absent, not a single phone call, not a single message, not one word of concern. And now, when the children had grown, when everything finally seemed stable, Helen appeared again with firm demands. Maria took a deep breath, trying not to let the tension overwhelm her. She looked up at Helen sitting across from her, eyes red, face tired, yet still carrying a sense of self-satisfaction. Maria could not deny the pain rising in her chest. After all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights spent caring for the children, she never imagined her daughter would return with such harsh demands. The judge sitting above seemed to sense the tension in the room. He tilted his head slightly toward Maria and asked, "Do you have anything to say about this return?" His voice was serious, as if he truly wanted to understand what had happened. Maria looked at Helen, and there was no longer anger in her eyes, only a strange calmness. She knew nothing could shake her decision now. "Your Honor," Maria began, her voice gentle but steady. Helen left when the children were still very young, when they needed their mother the most, and she never came back. She paused, allowing the words to settle in the courtroom as if they were the final truth she needed to speak. Helen could not keep her composure. "Mom, please don't do this. I came back for them. I just want to be a good mother," Helen said, her voice bitter, yet there was something hollow within her words. Maria looked directly at her daughter, and a painful truth rose in her heart. "Really?" Maria asked quietly, yet there was no doubt in her voice. "You were not there during the hardest days of their lives, when they cried quietly at night because they did not know where their mother was. You were not there when they needed comfort, when they needed love. And now, when they are older, when they no longer need you the way they once did, you return with such a sudden demand." Helen lowered her head for a moment, then lifted it again, her eyes filled with anger. "You don't understand. I went through a lot of difficulties. I could not face my past. But now I am ready. Now I can be a good mother." Maria did not answer immediately. She looked toward her 3 grandchildren sitting behind her. Noah, now 18, said nothing, but his eyes seemed brighter, as if he finally understood everything. Sarah and Olivia were still young, yet they could feel the tension filling the room. These children, even though they had grown up in Maria's arms, still carried curiosity and sometimes fears they could never fully express. Maria felt a deep ache in her heart, yet she also felt a truth she could not deny. "Do you know something, Helen? When the 3 children were small, I had to do everything. Not because I wanted to be a wonderful grandmother, but because I loved them, and because they needed me." She paused, letting the words settle. "I never waited for your return, because you had already abandoned them long ago." Helen looked at Maria, her eyes red, but Maria could clearly see the truth behind them. It was not remorse. It was necessity, a return driven by money. Only after Maria had an inheritance, only after the children had grown and could one day access a large fortune, did Helen decide to return. "Don't you see, Mom? This is a chance for us to have a better life." Helen's voice became weaker, yet the desire in her eyes could not be hidden. Maria did not waver. "I do not need that better life, Helen. I only need to know that I did the right thing, and I will not allow you to rewrite what has already happened." Maria stood up, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "You can say that you love them, but love is not words. Love is action. It is presence. It is the sacrifices a mother must make, and you did none of those things." Helen suddenly stood up as well, her face showing the look of someone defeated. She glanced toward the three children sitting behind, her eyes filled with conflict. "I just want to give them a better life, a better opportunity," Helen said, her voice trembling. Maria quietly looked at her daughter without saying anything more. She was too tired of empty words, of promises Helen had never kept. She turned back toward her three grandchildren. "You are old enough now to understand what is happening, and if you want to decide your own future, I will respect your decision." Everyone in the courtroom fell silent. Maria, Helen, the three children, all of them were standing at a crossroads. Maria had nothing more to say. She had only one thing left to do: to protect the children she had raised. Everything was clear now, and she was ready to fight until the end. The tension in the courtroom felt heavier than ever. Maria sat upright, her hands gripping the yellow envelope tightly as if it were the only key capable of unlocking the truth. She looked at the faces around her, the judge, Helen's lawyer, and her daughter sitting across from her with eyes full of resentment and defiance. Although Helen still maintained an arrogant appearance, deep inside Maria knew she was afraid. What Maria was about to present would expose the truth, leaving no room for denial. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the wave of emotions rising within her, and slowly began to open the envelope. Every movement felt heavy, as if she were opening a door that had been closed for many years. The evidence she had protected for so long would now become the strongest confirmation of the sacrifices and pain she had endured. "Your Honor," Maria began, her voice firm and no longer trembling, "I do not only have words. I have evidence that will clearly prove everything." She slowly took out several photographs that had been carefully arranged inside a file. The entire courtroom fell silent, every eye fixed on her, waiting for what she would reveal next. "These are photographs I took on the day Helen left the three children at my house after bringing them to me and saying she would only be gone for a short time. She never came back." Maria handed the photographs to the judge, and soon everyone in the courtroom could see them. The children in those images were only small kids at the time, dressed in torn clothes, their faces dirty, their hair messy, their eyes filled with fear. The images of Noah, Sarah, and Olivia in the early days after arriving at Maria's home made everyone feel a deep sense of sorrow. Maria said nothing more and simply looked at the judge, as if she wanted him to fully understand the meaning behind those photographs. Once again, Helen's eyes flashed with confusion. Her hands trembled as they gripped the edge of the table, unable to hide her anxiety. The evidence was simply too clear. The judge slowly nodded while carefully examining each photograph. Then he looked at Maria. "Can you explain more clearly about these photographs?" "These photographs show the truth. They cannot be denied," Maria replied, her voice filled with determination. "These children came to me in a state of abandonment with no one to care for them, and I had to do everything to help them survive those painful months." The courtroom fell silent once again. People began exchanging glances, as if slowly realizing the truth Maria was revealing. All eyes turned toward Helen, but she simply lowered her head and said nothing. Maria continued speaking. "Besides these photographs, I have also kept the letters Helen wrote to me during the first months after she left her children behind. I kept those letters as proof, not only of her absence, but also of the things she said. She told me she would not return, that she had started a new life. But when I asked about the children, she said they were no longer her concern." Maria slowly took out a bundle of letters that had been carefully preserved. She handed them to the judge and to Helen's lawyer. As the judge read the letters, the tension in the courtroom grew even heavier. In those letters, Helen wrote about a new relationship, about meeting a man and starting a new life that did not include the three children. In another letter, Helen even asked Maria to keep the children because she could not care for them, and she only hoped to take them back when she felt she could become a better mother. Maria paused for a moment, allowing her words and the silence to settle over everyone. She left them for a man, for a new life. We were all that remained for each other. But even so, I always told the children that their mother loved them, even if she could not be with them. Maria's voice echoed strongly, like a firm declaration that she had done the right thing no matter what Helen had done. The judge did not respond immediately. He simply remained silent, rereading the letters and reflecting on all the evidence Maria had presented. Maria looked at her daughter once again, and this time she saw no regret in Helen's eyes, only defiance. "Your Honor, I would like to present one more important piece of evidence," Maria said, her voice full of determination. "This is a document Helen signed 3 days after she left, a document giving up her parental custody rights. She signed it and sent it to me, asking me to raise the children without asking anything further from her." Maria placed the document on the table, and the atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier than ever. Everyone looked toward Helen, and nothing she could say now would be strong enough to hide the truth. So after everything, Helen completely gave up her parental rights without any pressure from anyone, Maria said, looking straight into her daughter's eyes. And now she returns for only one reason: money. Helen lifted her head, her eyes burning with anger, but she could not deny it. All the evidence stood against her. Maria had prepared everything, and the truth, painful as it was, could not be denied. The judge nodded slowly, his eyes sharper than ever. "I understand now, Mrs. Maria. This evidence will be an important basis in this case." Then he turned to look at Helen with a strict expression. The entire courtroom fell silent again. Everything was clearer than ever. The truth had been revealed, and Maria was not only the protector of her family, she was the one who had won this battle. The entire courtroom fell silent. The tension in the air was so heavy that Maria could hear her own breathing, steady and deep. The evidence she had just presented had struck the truth like stones, exposing everything Helen had tried to hide for so many years. Yet Maria knew her daughter would not easily accept defeat. She could clearly see that Helen was struggling within herself, not out of regret, but because of a pride that had never truly changed. Maria looked straight at the judge, her eyes filled with determination, without the slightest trace of worry. She had prepared for this moment for 13 years, ever since the day the children were brought to her and left in her arms. 13 years of care, 13 years of love and sacrifice, all of it had led to this moment, to this chance to prove that she had done the right thing. The judge looked at Maria with a heavy expression. He said nothing and simply observed her quietly. Her hands were still gripping the papers, the carefully prepared evidence she had brought with her. Meanwhile, Helen's lawyer, Mark Sullivan, who had stood confidently throughout the proceedings earlier, no longer looked as certain as before. He now sat silently, staring at the evidence Maria had presented as if there was nothing left to deny. Helen sat motionless with her hands clenched tightly on the table. Her face showed discomfort, and the anger in her eyes could not be hidden. Maria knew Helen did not want to admit the truth, but there was no way left to reverse what had already been revealed. Everything was far too clear. At last Helen spoke, but her voice was no longer as sharp as before. "What have you done, Mom?" she asked, her voice choking with emotion. I never imagined you would do this to me." Those words came from Helen's mouth, yet they could not shake Maria in the slightest. Maria felt no pity for her daughter. All she felt was exhaustion and disappointment. The years she had spent raising the three children, the sleepless nights, the endless days of work, none of it could ever be erased from her heart. What she felt now was simply that the truth had been revealed, and Helen's deception could no longer remain hidden. Maria looked directly at Helen and then spoke, her voice firm, each word coming from a heart that had long since hardened with pain. "You want to take these children back, not because of a mother's love, but because of money. You only returned after learning they would inherit a large amount of money. You forgot about them for years. You never cared about them. Not a single question, not a single message, because you no longer needed them. The courtroom fell silent once again. No one spoke, only Maria's calm breathing could be heard. Every word she spoke sounded like a sharp accusation, confirming that Helen had done wrong, and that she would not allow her daughter to continue deceiving everyone. Helen could no longer maintain her cold expression. Her voice broke as she raised her hands to her face, trying to hide the pain rising within her. "You don't understand anything. I have changed. I can be a good mother now. I just need a chance, one chance to start again," Helen said. But there was no real conviction in her voice. Nothing but the pain she had created for herself. Maria stood up and stepped toward the evidence table. A powerful feeling rose within her. This was the moment she had to make everything clear, to make the truth an inseparable part of her life and the children's lives. "You can say that you have changed, that you deserve the chance to be a mother, but you left them and never came back. For 13 years, you never contacted them even once. For 13 years, you never responded when I begged for help while raising these 3 children." Maria emphasized every word and every sentence, her eyes never leaving her daughter. The judge, who had remained silent until that moment, slowly nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Maria. The evidence you have presented is very clear. It will serve as an important basis for our decision." He turned to look at Helen's lawyer, Mr. Cunning, Mark Sullivan, and then at Helen herself. "Mrs. Helen, do you have anything you would like to add?" Helen remained silent. She did not answer. She simply lowered her head as if accepting the bitter truth she could no longer deny. Her hands were still clenched tightly, but the arrogance that once filled them had disappeared. The reality was that she knew she had lost, and everything Maria had presented could not be denied. Maria felt a sense of relief, yet the pain inside her heart had not faded. She turned to look at her 3 grandchildren, the children she had loved and raised since they were very small. "You now understand the truth, and you will always be my family. I am your mother, no one else." Her voice softened, as if she wanted to give them a sense of safety, to let them know that no matter what happened, she would always be there to protect them. In that moment, Maria no longer felt anxious. She had done everything she could to protect her family, and now the truth had been revealed. It was the end of a painful chapter, yet also the turning point that would allow a new chapter to begin. The moments inside the courtroom seemed to stretch endlessly. Maria sat there, her eyes never leaving her 3 grandchildren sitting quietly behind her. Each child carried a different expression, yet in their eyes there was a quiet understanding that had grown over the years under one roof, filled with love, even while life outside had brought many trials and storms. Maria knew this was an important moment, not only for her, but also for the 3 children. They would have to face their own decision, a decision that had followed them throughout their lives, not because anyone forced them to make it, but because they themselves had lived through the truth. Children who had witnessed their mother abandon them, while their grandmother stepped in to raise them in her place. Maria looked at Noah, the 18-year-old who had now grown into a young man, confident yet unable to completely hide the worry in his eyes. Sarah, 16, appeared more thoughtful, as if she were still processing everything that had happened. Olivia, the youngest at 13, had sadness in her gaze, yet there was also a quiet strength in every movement she made. Maria took a deep breath, trying to hold back the emotions rising inside her chest. The children had grown up with her, without a mother, without the care of the woman who gave birth to them. They had grown within a family where love was never lacking, yet one that was also filled with silent sacrifices. Every smile they carried, every confident step they took, was the result of the sacrifices she had made to keep warmth alive inside their home. "Maria," the judge finally spoke gently, breaking the silence, "I think we should hear the children's thoughts." He turned toward the 3 of them, his expression encouraging. "Would you like to come forward and share how you feel?" Maria turned toward the children. At that moment, Olivia tightened her grip on her grandmother's hand. Sarah lowered her head slightly, her shoulders trembling a little, yet Maria could still see the determination in the girl's eyes. Noah, the oldest, looked at Maria with warmth, but there was also a clear sense of resolve in his gaze. Maria looked into the eyes of each child, knowing that now they had the right to decide. The decision was not about the event unfolding in the courtroom, but about how they saw their past, how they faced the choices that had shaped their lives. She would not impose anything upon them. She was only their protector, the one who loved them. All she could do was create a safe space where they could speak freely and make their own decision without fear. Noah was the first to stand up. He walked slowly, his steps carrying a hint of hesitation, yet there was undeniable determination in the way he moved forward. He reached the witness stand, turned briefly to look at both his mother and his grandmother, then began to speak. "Your Honor," Noah said, his voice deep but steady. "I do not remember much about my mother. The memories I have of her are only fragments in my mind. What I truly remember is my grandmother, Maria, the person who was always there when we needed someone the most. She is my mother. She did everything for me. She taught me about life and about responsibility. Whenever I had problems, she was the only person I could rely on. And no matter what my mother says today, I will never forget what my grandmother has done for me." Maria felt a wave of warmth rise inside her heart. The feeling was impossible to describe with words. The child she had loved and raised was no longer an innocent little boy, but a young man with a mature mind, ready to face the world with confidence. Sarah stood up immediately after him and walked toward the witness stand. She did not look at Helen. She looked only at the judge and then at Maria. "I would like to speak too," Sarah began, her voice soft but clear enough for everyone in the courtroom to hear. "I do not remember my mother. What I remember is Maria, the person who always took care of me whenever I was sick, whenever I faced difficulties. My mother left us, but Maria never abandoned us. I do not even know what I should call her anymore, but she is my family. And now that Maria has done everything so we could have this life, I cannot help but thank her. My mother does not deserve the right to raise me. I only have one mother, and that is Maria." After Sarah finished speaking, Olivia slowly stepped forward. Her eyes were red with emotion, but her voice did not tremble. "I know that Maria has done everything for us," Olivia said, her eyes shining as she looked at her grandmother. "She does not need to say anything more. My mother is not the person I wish for. But Maria, she taught me everything in life. She has been our mother. She gave us everything good that we have today. My mother was never here when we needed someone. Maria is the real mother in my life." Maria felt her throat tighten with emotion. The three children had spoken the deepest truths in their hearts. And as Olivia finished those words, Maria realized that the children had grown up, not through speeches or explanations, but through the quiet actions she had taken throughout their lives. The judge looked at the three children, his eyes filled with appreciation. "You have spoken very clearly," he said, "and I believe this is an important decision for each of you. Your support for Maria is unmistakable." Maria allowed herself a gentle smile. This had not been an easy victory, but she felt a deep sense of relief, knowing that the children had finally been able to speak the truth. She was not only the one who protected them, she was also the one who helped them understand what truly mattered most in life: unconditional love. And she would always remain their protector, their second mother, until the very end of her life. The courtroom once again fell into a heavy silence. Every eye turned toward Maria. Throughout the entire trial, she had not only been the one standing up to protect her three grandchildren, she had also been the one forced to face the most difficult decisions. This was not simply a battle for custody. It was a battle to prove one undeniable truth: that she was the real family these children had. And now, everything was clear. Her grandchildren had spoken their minds, showing both their maturity and their gratitude toward the woman who had become their second mother. Maria looked toward the judge, who sat there with a serious expression, no longer showing any sign of leniency in his eyes. The evidence she had presented, along with the words spoken by the three children, had now placed the final authority in his hands. She knew that no matter what happened, she would not truly lose. Even if the judge's decision turned out to be painful, it could never change the truth that she had devoted her entire life to protecting those children. Still, she allowed herself to hope that the sacrifices she had made would not be dismissed. "Maria," the judge spoke, his voice deep and serious, I have heard all the evidence and testimonies from both sides. This is not an easy case, and we will need some time to reach a final decision. Maria nodded quietly without saying anything more. She understood that nothing was guaranteed. This decision could change everything. It could even take away the children she had loved for so many years. But regardless of the outcome, Maria would never regret what she had done. She had done everything out of an endless love for them, and that love could never be diminished. The judge continued speaking. However, I want both sides to remember that whether someone is the biological mother or the grandmother, the right to raise a child is not something that can simply be taken away because of a long absence. What truly matters is the care, the love, and the sacrifices that the caregiver has devoted to the child throughout their growth. Maria listened carefully to every word, and she suddenly felt as if a weight inside her chest had begun to lift. She knew that everything she had done was for the growth and happiness of her grandchildren. Her journey had never been a fight for power. It had been an act of unconditional devotion, a lifelong effort to protect the safety and happiness of children who could not protect themselves. Helen sat in silence, saying nothing. She stared down at the floor, tears filling her eyes, yet there was still no sign of real regret or change. Maria could sense Helen's suffering, but she could not feel sorrow for her. Helen had been given too many chances to change, too many chances to return and care for these children. Now it was simply too late. At that moment, Maria's 3 grandchildren stood up once again. All 3 of them looked toward the judge, each with a different expression but sharing the same thought. Noah, the oldest, lifted his hand to brush his hair back, his voice calm yet firm. Your Honor, I only want to say that we do not need anything except peace. We have lived with Maria. We have grown up surrounded by her love, and I know that she is the only mother we truly need. He paused briefly before continuing. I know my mother made mistakes, but I also know that Maria is not someone we could ever turn away from. Sarah looked directly at the judge, her expression serious and unwavering. Our mother was never there for us, but Maria did everything she possibly could. We do not need to search for anyone else, because Maria is our family. Sarah turned to look at Maria, her eyes shining as if silently telling her that she never needed to worry about their choice. Olivia, the youngest, lifted her gaze toward the judge, her eyes shimmering yet filled with determination. I do not need to see my mother anymore. Maria has already been my mother. I feel peaceful living with her, and I will always stay by her side. Her voice was firm, without even the slightest tremble, carrying nothing but truth and deep gratitude. Maria looked at the 3 children, and she could not fully express the emotions filling her heart. These children, though still so young, already possessed the wisdom to understand that love is not something that can easily be replaced, and she had done everything possible to make sure they would never have to endure more pain. Finally, the judge nodded, clearly having reached his decision. He looked at Maria once more, his expression filled with respect. After carefully reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, I have decided to maintain Maria's legal guardianship of the 3 children. Helen, although you are their biological mother, you abandoned your responsibility to raise them, and your absence throughout their lives has created a distance that cannot be repaired with words alone. Helen collapsed into her chair, unable to speak, only quiet sobs escaping from her. She could not face the reality before her. Maria simply looked at her without smiling, without mockery, only calm acceptance. The judge continued, This decision takes effect immediately. Maria will continue to serve as the children's guardian and their mother. As for Helen, the court requires that you comply with supervision regulations, and you will not have the right to contact the children for the next 5 years unless they themselves give consent. Maria felt as if a massive weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. But the most important victory was not the one that had taken place in the courtroom. The real victory was in the hearts of herself and the 3 children. Now her family had been protected, and that was all she had ever needed. When the hearing finally ended, Maria looked at her 3 grandchildren, and they looked back at her with eyes full of love. In that moment, she understood that they had become a true family, bound together without any conditions at all. After the trial ended, Maria returned home with a heart that felt lighter, yet still heavy in many ways. In the end, justice had stood on her side, but that was not truly what she had wished for. All Maria had ever wanted was a peaceful life, a life where she could raise the three children with love without having to face a battle for them. But now, as the courtroom doors had closed behind her, she understood that the story was not over. A new chapter had only just begun. She stepped into the house where her three grandchildren were sitting around the dining table. A calm and peaceful atmosphere filled the home, and Maria could clearly feel the change not only within herself, but also within the children. They had overcome many challenges together, and now, even though life was still not perfect, she no longer felt alone. Her life had a clear purpose, protecting the children she had raised for the past 13 years. They were her family, and she would do everything in her power to protect that peace. Noah looked up at her as she entered the room. He had grown up and was no longer the 10-year-old boy who had once been innocent and easily hurt. Now he was a young man, strong and determined. "Maria," Noah said, his voice deep and gentle, "we are going to be all right. My mother will have to face what she has done. All I know is that you have always been our mother. We do not need anything except the love and care you have given us all these years." Maria smiled softly as she walked over and sat beside him. "Thank you, Noah. I do not even know what to say anymore. Everything I did was for you children, and if I had to start all over again, I would still choose to do exactly what I did. I only hope that you will always be happy and never feel that you lack love." Sarah sat beside them, her eyes filled with determination. "Maria, thank you so much. My mother may come back, but I do not need her anymore. You are my family. I love you." Sarah said quietly as she gently held Maria's hand. She did not need to say more, because the warmth in her eyes already spoke everything that words could not fully express. Olivia, the youngest, had bright and clear eyes. Even though she was only 13, she seemed far more mature than her age. "I know my mother is not here, but I do not feel like I am missing anything, because Maria is my mother. I love you." Olivia's voice was pure and calm, yet filled with remarkable determination. Every word she spoke sounded like a firm affirmation that family is not defined only by blood, but also by sacrifice and love. Maria could not say anything more. A deep sense of happiness rose inside her, yet it also came with a tightness in her chest. These children might not yet fully understand everything, but they had already learned that love is something that cannot be replaced by any reason. This love was not just words, it was actions, presence, sleepless nights, tears shed when they faced difficulties, and bright smiles when they overcame their struggles. "I will always be here, and I will never leave you," Maria said, her voice filled with emotion. "Whether your mother returns or not, I will be the one standing beside you for the rest of your lives. And you will never have to experience abandonment again." Later, in the warm atmosphere of their home, the three children returned to their own activities. Noah opened his books and began reviewing his lessons for an important upcoming exam. Sarah carefully prepared dinner for the whole family. Olivia picked up her favorite guitar and began playing cheerful melodies. Maria watched them quietly, feeling the peace and happiness within these simple moments. Yet deep inside her mind, she still carried many thoughts. Life would never be easy. The journey of being a mother and a grandmother would always be full of challenges, but she knew she had done the right thing. And no matter if the storms of the past tried to rise again, no matter if Helen returned once more, Maria would never allow these children to suffer abandonment and pain ever again. That evening, the whole family sat together for dinner. The meal was simple, but it was filled with love. Maria looked at her three grandchildren, each of them carrying their own dreams and their own path in life, yet all of them shared one thing in common: the unconditional love she had given them. The next day, while Maria was working in the garden, an unexpected phone call from an unfamiliar number startled her. She answered the phone and heard Helen's voice on the other end. "Mom, I want to talk to you." Helen's voice sounded weak, no longer carrying the strength or arrogance it once had. Maria did not rush to respond. She listened, but there was only one thought in her mind. No matter what Helen said, whether she regretted her actions or claimed to have changed, The most important thing was that the children she had raised would never have to suffer abandonment again. "You do not need to say anything more, Helen," Maria replied, her voice gentle yet firm. "You had 13 years to change. Now I will let the children decide what they want." The call ended. Maria stood there quietly, looking toward the children in the garden, and she knew she had done everything she possibly could. These children would always have a real family, and no matter what happened in the future, she would always remain the one who protected them until the very end. Maria no longer felt the heavy weight she once carried. Even though there were still worries and unanswered questions, she knew she had done the right thing. After everything, she had protected her family, not only with evidence, but also with unconditional love. She looked at her 3 children, now grown and maturing, and felt a deep sense of peace inside her heart. What she had been searching for during the past 13 years was never recognition or repayment. It was a real home, a place where love and care would be the only things that mattered. And now she could finally see that clearly. Their small house had become peaceful again after the trial. Although the emotional wounds could not heal quickly, at least she knew the children no longer had to live with the fear of being abandoned again. The difficult days seemed to have passed, and with every day that went by, she saw her grandchildren becoming stronger. Noah, now 18 years old, had grown into a promising young man. He had begun preparing for his graduation exams and was planning to continue his studies at a university. Maria looked at him with pride, yet deep inside she carried a quiet concern she never spoke aloud. He had been forced to grow up too quickly, but now she did not worry as she once had. Noah could walk his own path. Sarah, the 16-year-old girl, had become very different from before. She had learned how to take care of herself while still helping Maria with the work around the house. Sarah had a sensitive soul, and Maria always believed that the girl would accomplish wonderful things in the future. She had learned how to care for herself while also loving others in a very special way. Olivia, the youngest, was now 13 years old. Even though she was still young, she was strong and carried a determination that could not easily be shaken. She had a deep passion for music, and Maria could see that Olivia would do remarkable things in the future. She only needed a little more time to find her own path. Day after day, nothing seemed to change dramatically, but for Maria, the smallest moments were the most meaningful. She knew this peace would not last forever, but at least she had done what she believed was right. She had helped her grandchildren build a strong future, not from what she possessed, but from what she had given them: love, protection, and sacrifice. One weekend afternoon, while she was sitting on the front porch and letting out a long breath, her phone suddenly rang. Maria looked at the screen and froze when she saw the name that appeared. Helen. It had been a long time since she had received a call from her daughter. During the past days, she had not even thought about calling back or speaking with her. But now, as the phone continued ringing, she could not help but feel a small wave of uneasiness. "Maria," Helen's voice came through the phone, sounding tired and slightly weak. "I want to meet you." Maria did not answer immediately and remained silent for a moment. These words were not something new. For 13 years, Helen had been absent when she was needed, and now she appeared again asking for a meeting, as if it were a final chance. Maria felt a mixture of firmness and a small trace of pity in her heart. "Why do you want to meet me?" Maria asked, her voice calm but firm. "To apologize. To start over again." "I understand that I was wrong," Helen replied, her voice catching as if it took all her strength to say those words. Maria did not rush to respond. She looked out toward the garden where the children were playing happily. Her children were no longer afraid, no longer forced to endure abandonment. She could not allow them to face their mother's past once again. "My daughter, I have loved those children as if they were my own. I did everything to raise them and protect them. But you, Helen, why have you come back now? Have you truly changed?" Maria asked, her eyes still fixed on the children. "Maria, I know I was wrong," Helen answered, her voice now trembling slightly as if she truly wanted to show her regret. "I was selfish. I was not there for them when they needed me the most. I abandoned them and only thought about myself. I regret that deeply. But now I want to start again." Maria felt an unusual firmness rise inside her heart. This was not the apology she had been waiting for. No words could heal the wounds that had been carved so deeply into her heart and into the lives of the children. "Helen," Maria began, her voice gentle yet unwavering, "you may change, but that does not mean my grandchildren must accept you immediately. They have become used to a life without you, and if one day they want to meet you, they will decide that for themselves." On the other end of the phone, Helen said nothing, but the heavy silence was unmistakable. Maria knew Helen would have to live with the consequences of her choices, just as she herself had done for so many years. The conversation ended, and Maria returned once again to her peaceful life. She did not know what the future would bring, but she knew she had done the right thing. Her 3 grandchildren would always have a family, and no matter what happened, she would always remain their protector and their mother. Challenges might still come, but Maria knew she would always overcome them, because the love she carried for them was unconditional. Life seemed to return to the path Maria had worked so hard to build over the years. The house was still filled with the laughter and voices of the 3 children, and although they had grown older and were gradually stepping into new stages of their lives, Maria still felt that every passing day was a miracle. The children were no longer only her pride. They were also the reason she continued to live, to fight, and to protect them no matter how difficult life might become. However, whenever Maria sat alone in the garden, the place where she had spent so much time caring for flowers and nurturing life, she sometimes felt a strange emptiness in her heart. Even though she did not expect any real change from Helen, a small part of her still felt that something was missing. That feeling was not the absence of her daughter's attention, but rather an old hope that had once lived quietly inside her, the hope that one day everything might return to normal, that the family might somehow be reunited, that the bond between mother and daughter would not remain broken forever. Helen had appeared a few times and had offered apologies, but Maria understood that words alone could never heal the deep wounds inside her heart and inside the hearts of the 3 children. For 13 years, Helen had not been part of their lives. She had shown no care at all, and what Maria had done in her place was something that could never truly be replaced. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight slowly faded, Maria sat alone beside the wooden table on the porch. The familiar feeling of solitude returned, yet she knew it was the solitude of peace rather than the pain of absence. The children were now able to live their own lives and grow on their own. Still, memories of Helen continued to linger in her mind, not easily forgotten, especially because she knew that no matter what happened, Helen was still their mother, and that connection could never be completely erased. Maria quietly thought about the past, about the days when Helen had been a young girl full of hope and dreams. She remembered their conversations, the plans for the future they had once imagined together. But all those dreams had shattered in the moment of abandonment. Maria could not entirely blame Helen for her mistakes, yet she could never allow those mistakes to hurt her grandchildren. The children had grown up surrounded by love, but they had also grown up with the absence of the mother who gave birth to them. Just then, Olivia ran out from the house, her eyes shining with excitement. "Maria, I have good news," she exclaimed. Maria was startled for a moment before smiling warmly. The atmosphere of the home instantly became lively again, and Maria knew that no matter what happened, the 3 children would always remain her greatest source of hope. "What is it, Olivia?" Maria asked, her eyes fixed on the girl. Olivia sat down beside her, still glowing with excitement. "I just received a full scholarship to a music school," she said proudly. "I will be able to study at a famous school in the city. I still cannot believe it." Maria felt her heart beat faster as a wave of pride and happiness filled her chest. Olivia, the little girl she had raised and protected for so many years, now had a great opportunity to pursue her passion. This was not only an important turning point in the girl's life, it was also clear proof that her children would never be left behind, no matter how difficult their circumstances once were. "You did very well, Olivia," Maria said, her voice full of emotion. "I always knew you could do it. You have talent and determination. But remember, Wherever you go, I will always be here supporting you. Olivia wrapped her arms around Maria in a warm embrace filled with affection. Thank you, Maria. I love you so much. Maria smiled, her eyes moist with emotion. This girl had made her prouder than anything else in her life. The dreams she once had of watching the children grow up, succeed, and find happiness were slowly becoming real. Even without Helen here, Maria did not feel alone. She had the 3 children she loved unconditionally, and they would always be by her side. Noah then stepped out from the house holding a thick book in his hands. Maria, I am studying for my upcoming exam, but I also have some good news to share, he said with a bright smile. I have been accepted into the university I dreamed of attending. I will study engineering, and I will have a great opportunity to build my career. Maria felt her throat tighten with emotion. You did very well, Noah, she said, unable to hide her feelings. I knew you could do it. You have ability and a heart full of passion. I will always remember everything you taught me. I will never forget you, Noah replied, his eyes shining with happiness. Sarah then came out of the kitchen carrying a tray of freshly baked pastries. Maria, can we celebrate? All 3 of us have good news today, she said with a bright smile on her face. Maria looked at her 3 children and her heart filled with emotion. This was her family. There had been difficult moments and many tears in the past, but love had helped them overcome everything. She needed nothing more than this peace, and she would protect her family until the very end. Of course we will celebrate, my dear, Maria said gently, her voice filled with pride. I am happy for all of you, and I love you more than anything in this world. In that moment, Maria realized that no matter what hardships had happened in the past, no matter how many wounds had not fully healed, she had done everything she could to give the 3 children a bright future. Her story was not over yet, but with her grandchildren beside her, she knew that life would continue, filled with hope and love. Maria sat alone in the garden, the light of the late afternoon sun softly illuminating her face with a quiet sense of peace. The trees and plants around her had begun to change their leaves, creating a calm and tranquil scene. Yet inside her heart, things were not always as simple as they appeared on the surface. Especially after the unexpected phone call from Helen a few days earlier, her thoughts continued to circle endlessly in her mind. Maria knew that no matter what happened, she would always remain the protector of this family. But the question of whether she should give Helen a chance or not continued to linger in her thoughts. For 13 years, she had raised the 3 children without any support from her daughter. She had become their mother. She had sacrificed everything for them. And now that Helen had returned, she could not help but ask herself one painful question. Had Helen come back because of money or because of genuine love? A gentle knock on the door suddenly broke her train of thought. Maria lifted her head and saw the 3 children standing in the doorway, each of them looking worried yet determined at the same time. Noah, the oldest, stepped in first, followed by Sarah and Olivia. All 3 of them stood silently watching her, as if they were waiting for her to say something. What is it, children? Maria asked softly, though her voice carried a quiet seriousness. The 3 children had grown up, and now they were no longer little ones who needed to be completely protected. They were capable of making their own decisions. But Maria knew that whatever decision she made would deeply affect them. Noah was the first to speak. Maria, I think we need to talk. Mom called you, didn't she? He asked, looking at her with concern in his eyes. I don't want you to do something you don't want to do. I know you have done everything for us, but I also think you deserve to have your own choice. Maria looked at him silently, feeling the maturity in his words. The boy she had raised since he was only a small child had now grown into someone who could think deeply about life. I don't know what I should do anymore, Maria replied softly, her voice trembling slightly. I love all of you, and I want to do what is right for you, but I cannot stop thinking about your mother, about what she has done, and about what she may be trying to do now. Sarah spoke next, her voice filled with determination. You don't have to worry about us, Maria. I know you have done everything to protect us. I don't need our mother. I only need you. She looked at Maria with eyes full of love and gratitude. We have grown up surrounded by your love, and that is the most important thing. Olivia, the youngest, was just as strong. She left us, and you are the only person I need. You are my family, Olivia said firmly, her eyes filled with determination. I don't need to see her again. I only need you, Maria. Maria found herself unable to speak. The words of her grandchildren felt like a powerful confirmation that she had done the right thing all these years. Yet deep inside, she still could not completely ignore the feeling that Helen, no matter how many mistakes she had made, was still their mother. She could not forget the years that had passed when Helen left the three children behind to chase a different life, abandoning everything. But you all know that she is still your mother, Maria finally said, her voice thick with emotion. No matter what, no matter why she has returned, I cannot deny that truth. Noah stepped closer to her and bent down slightly to look at her, while the other two children stood quietly behind him. Maria, I understand, he said gently. But you have to remember that our mother is not the only person capable of loving us. You have done more than enough for us. If you believe that she has truly changed and deserves a chance to see us again, then that is your decision. But never forget that we will always stand by your side. Maria looked into the eyes of the three children. All of them were looking at her with love and respect. A deep sense of pride filled her heart, yet there was also a heavy weight resting there. She knew that this decision would not be easy. This was not only a decision about their mother, it was also a decision about how she wanted to protect her family in the future. After a long moment, Maria let out a quiet sigh, then slowly stood up and looked at her grandchildren. I will meet Helen one more time, but I do not know what will happen after that. I do not know whether I will be able to forgive her or whether she has truly changed. The three children looked at her and said nothing more. They understood that this was an important decision for Maria. No matter what happened, she would always remain their family. Maria walked out of the garden and looked toward the road in the distance. Part of her still felt afraid, yet another part of her felt a quiet sense of release. She had never abandoned her grandchildren, and she would never abandon them again. This decision, no matter how difficult, would be the next step in her journey. She had never given up, and she would never give up on the people she loved. Maria sat in the living room, her hands tightly holding a warm cup of tea. Outside, the autumn wind moved through the branches of the trees, carrying the gentle scent of the earth. The house was quiet, with only the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the ticking of the wall clock marking each passing second. Her three children had gone out, leaving her alone with a space she could not use to escape her own thoughts. Today, she would meet Helen again. This meeting was not an easy decision. 13 years had passed, and during that time, Maria had built a new family with her three grandchildren. Those children were not only the ones she had protected and raised, they had become inseparable parts of her life. They were everything she had, and the peace in her life existed because of them. But today, Helen would return. Maria did not know whether this meeting would change anything, but she understood that her daughter, even after all her mistakes and all the years of absence, still had the right to face the truth. Maria would not allow the past to repeat itself, yet she could not completely refuse her. Maria sighed and placed the cup of tea on the table. Gentle footsteps sounded near the door, and Noah was the first to walk in. He saw her sitting alone, her expression slightly worried, but when their eyes met, he smiled softly. Are you all right? Noah asked gently, his voice filled with concern. Maria looked at him and felt warmth in her heart. I'm all right, my dear, but I am a little worried. This meeting will not be easy. Noah sat down beside her and gently touched her hand. I understand, Maria, but I think you have done the right thing. If you feel that you need to meet my mother, then that is your choice. My sisters and I will always be here beside you. Maria said nothing. She simply nodded quietly. Sarah walked in next, her eyes soft yet full of determination. Maria, we know you have done so much for us. You are our mother, and we will never forget that. Our mother made wrong decisions, but you have always been the one who did what was right. Sarah sat close to her, her eyes filled with gratitude. She was no longer a child who depended on the love of her biological mother. She had grown into someone who understood deeply everything that had happened in her life. Olivia, the youngest, came in last, her eyes still bright as always, innocent yet strong. "Maria, I know it is not easy for you to decide to meet our mother again, but I believe you will do what is right. You are the only mother I need." Maria looked at the three children and her heart was filled with emotion. Whether Helen had returned or whether she had truly changed did not matter anymore. Maria knew she would never leave these three children. They were the only reason she had continued to live and fight through all these years. "I will go to meet her, but I do not know what will happen after that," Maria said gently but firmly. "You have all grown up, and I know we have never needed anyone else but each other. Even if your mother appears again, I will never abandon you." The three children remained silent and said nothing more. They all understood that this decision, no matter how difficult, belonged to her. They could not change the past, but they could choose their own future. And their future was this family. It was Maria. After a while, Maria stood up, and the three children walked with her to the door. They quietly got into the car together, and Maria could feel every breath she took, heavy with concern. She did not know how this meeting would end, but at least she no longer felt the same fear as before. She had been preparing for this moment for 13 years. Nothing could return to the way it once was, but she would do everything to protect her family, even if it meant facing a truth she could not avoid. When they arrived at the meeting place, Maria stepped out of the car and looked at the old house where Helen had once lived before leaving. Everything looked the same. Yet inside her heart, there was no longer the feeling of hope she once had. 13 years had passed, and everything had changed. Helen was no longer the daughter she had once loved and believed in. Whether Helen had changed or not, she would now have to face the consequences of her choices. Maria walked into the house where Helen was waiting. Helen sat there quietly, no longer carrying the confidence and pride she once had. She looked exhausted and worn, as if she had endured many painful experiences. Maria looked at her for a long moment without speaking, simply feeling the heavy silence between them. "Maria?" Helen finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I know I made terrible mistakes. I do not know what I can do to make things right again. But I truly want to start over. I regret abandoning my children. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I only want a chance to be a real mother." Maria remained silent for a moment before speaking, her voice calm but firm. "Helen, being their mother is not something I can change. I have given those children a life filled with love and care, and I will never allow anything to hurt them again. If you want to see them, that is their decision, not mine." Helen lowered her head as tears slowly fell, but Maria did not feel pity. "You chose to leave, and now they must decide their own future. As for me, I will always remain their family." The meeting ended in silence. Maria walked out of the house without turning back, because she knew that no matter what had happened, she had done the right thing. For 13 years, she had built a real family, and no one could take that away from her. Those children, no matter what happened, would always be her family. Thank you for following the emotional story of Maria and her three grandchildren. Life is never easy, but through every challenge, we begin to realize that love, sacrifice, and strong decisions will always guide us toward a better future. Never forget that family is the place where we find our strength, and unconditional love will always be the most important thing. If this story has touched your heart, do not hesitate to share your thoughts in the comment section below the video. Please press like if you feel moved, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the next meaningful stories. Let us spread love and hope together so that we can overcome every difficulty in life. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next videos.